all know, African countries, face a number of simultaneous structural crises, including climate change, external debt, poverty, unemployment, socioeconomic exclusion, inequality, you name them. And some of this also includes, the inadequate access to water, sanitation, healthcare, education, transportation, and clean energy. Inevitably, these crises exacerbate, the social and political tensions that often lead to cycles of violence and regional instability. So I don't want to actually just talk about climate change because our continent is actually faced by so many crises. And we cannot address, these challenges by using, the same underlying economic policies that have exacerbated and deepened these crises. If you look at our economies, they suffer from 3 structural deficiencies. The first one is the lack of food sovereignty. The second one is the lack of energy sovereignty. And the third one is, the low value added content, of exports relative to imports. When you look at the continent, and this is true for a majority of African countries, these are typically the key pressure points that produce, large, trade deficits, which consequently, puts downward, pressure on exchange rates of African currencies relative to major currencies like the US dollar or the euro. And so a weak currency means that imports of basic necessities such as food, fuel, and medicine will be more expensive. And so this type of imported inflation often leads to social and political instability, which governments typically avoid by subsidizing the price of basic necessities and by artificially, keeping the exchange rates strong, mostly via the accumulation of debt denominated in foreign currencies. And so this external debt, accumulation is believed to be a solution when it's actually a quagmire. Prioritizing debt payments, as we're now facing in majority of our countries, often means, you reduce allocations for education, for health, for critical, infrastructure investments. And furthermore, the policies that are designed to increase, foreign currency earnings to pay off the debt end up actually being an entrapment strategy that only deepens the quagmire. And so for a climate expert like me, why am I talking about these policies, these structural, deficiencies, and these traps? The reason is simple. There's no way out of these structural, traps unless we invest in food sovereignty, particularly at the national, sub-regional, and regional levels. Unless we invest in renewable energy sovereignty, and I'm particular about energy here, I'm saying renewable energy sovereignty. And the third is unless we develop a Pan-African industrial policy that capitalizes on the complementarity, of African resources and capabilities, and that allows us to take advantage of economies at scale within the continent, and prioritizes vital industries for the continent's resilience to external shocks. Why are these things critical, especially in the context we're in, where we are talking about tackling, climate change? Climate change, has been caused by the rich historic polluter. Our continent is home to about 17% of the global population. We account for less than 4% of the emissions. And we're on the front line and suffering fast and worse the impact of climate change. But the wealthy minority in the developed world have actually developed, in part because the rest of us have actually subsidized their development because they polluted without facing the cost of doing so. And so in order to fight climate change, we must embark on rapid decarbonization on a scale never seen before. And this must begin by banning, the expansion of any new, fossil fuel production, as well as, of course, the rapid phasing out of existing fossil fuel capacity. And in a continent where we have 600 million Africans without, energy access, and close to 1 billion Africans still dependent on traditional biomass, how do we actually, deliver the kind of decarbonization that is required? And that will only come if we had a radical decarbonization that required a just transition for all countries and workers, and afforded Africa the opportunity to actually leapfrog that energy and become a green leader, where the historic polluter would face the problem of climate change effectively provide the finance, the technology, and when I talk about technology here, we're talking about clean technology that will allow us to leapfrog to become, a renewable energy superpower. But these things won't happen unless Africa develops a long-term vision for itself. And I think it's important for us to realize if we continue to be part of, someone else's strategic vision, whether it's the US, EU, China, or Russia, we won't actually be able to deliver, the kind of transformation that our continent requires. I've learned from Jason, this good line, if you're not a rule maker, you become a rule checker. And I want to just add, if you don't have a long-term strategic vision of your own, you become someone else, you become part of someone else's strategic vision. And this is the challenge that we're facing. If you look at the world, it's currently undergoing, a massive restructuring. We're seeing the restructuring of the global economy in the aftermath of the COVID crisis and, the Russia-Ukraine war. And it's likely that this new model of globalization is likely to have three major hubs: North America, Asia, and Europe. With Africa and the rest of the global South yet again being left out and assigned the role of being a source for cheap raw materials and low-cost labor, which is what we've always had. And this is something we can actually challenge and address because we're having the COP coming to Africa. It's coming to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. And this COP is going to take place in the midst of, compounding international and local crises on food, energy, and environmental security. And so it's a chance for political decision makers to get to grip, of these crises and agree new ways to work together and address them. For the 30 years of the international climate negotiations, every African country has sent a delegation, mostly to negotiate an outcome that privileges the historic polluter and marginalizes the vulnerable countries in the global South. And so if you look at the model of engagement or the BAU, the business as usual engagement of our African states, there are several scenarios of disappointing outcomes for climate action that you can actually foresee. And this is something I want us to be thinking about for once, in a way in which we can actually shift the trajectory of Africa's engagements and how Africa actually engages in the international climate process to deliver on climate, to deliver on development, and to deliver on energy. Because these are three intersecting crises that can only be addressed if we tackle them together. And so the scenario that is before us is one where if we don't collectively influence the leadership of our continent, they're likely to compromise on Africa's energy transition by not affording the opportunity of Africa to leapfrog and Africa joining in the league of big polluters and extracting more fossil fuels in the name of addressing energy poverty, when we know fossil fuels, and particularly major decentralized fossil fuel plants, will always privilege the elites and major urban centers and will continue to actually marginalize, particularly the poor in the rural areas. The second challenge that is likely to be faced if we don't get ourselves organized is the failure of these talks to deliver on the adaptation or resilience outcomes that this continent requires, including the possibility of compromising on addressing loss and damage, and particularly unlocking the kind of loss and damage finance that is required. And so if you think about adaptation, and particularly the opportunity to leverage the delivery of adaptation finance and more generally climate finance, and address loss and damage and the pressure points that we have so that we can be able to target high emitting countries who have caused the climate problem, and through that have incurred a climate debt, both a mitigation debt and an adaptation debt and a loss and damage debt. If we don't shape the expectations of the narrative on COPs, and particularly an African COP under the Egyptian presidency, and fail to focus on how these COPs needs to take concrete steps forward on meeting our development objectives, meeting our energy objectives in terms of energy access objectives, including the transition, and failing to meet our resilience objectives in terms of addressing our food and water security, we will again fail, and we will say the multilateral process fails, failing to account for the fact that a quarter of the countries that will be negotiating in that space are African countries. And so here is an opportunity for us to rethink and reset how Africa engages in the international climate process, and use this one as a moment and as a chance for us to prove to the rest, particularly, that COPs can actually deliver if we come prepared and we get to a grip of the current multiple crises and agree a new ways of addressing them, where we will have a chance to shift the political narrative, and we start taking climate change seriously rather than something only our environment dockets actually worry about, and start actually making it central for what our agriculture ministers do, what our planning ministers do, or what our treasuries do, given that the kind of resilience on food and energy, on fossil fuels, the shift from fossil fuels, is something that the world economy will need to get behind. And then finally, the need to actually scale up collaboration. And when I talk about collaboration, it's mostly for me a ticket for us to actually be able to ensure the scaling up of the finance that is needed to unlock both climate and development for this continent. And so, colleagues, the structural traps that we face, the false solutions that have been sold to us. If I give you one example of false solutions as I wrap up, because of the entrapment that I talked about, you have policies that effectively encourage false solutions. And I'll give you one example, and that is tourism, for example. If you think about a policy that encourages tourism, it ends up basically increasing food and fuel imports so that we can be able to feed, transport, house, entertain millions of tourists. And so the policies that encourage exports end up leading to more imports. And what are the imports that it leads to? The imports of fuel, the import of capital equipment, and the other intermediate inputs. And so we have a situation where policies promote foreign direct investment, effectively end up increasing import of fuel, and particularly fossil fuel, so that we can increase energy production and transportation. And what that effectively does is basically it promotes the liberalization of financial services, which end up hurting our domestic investors and inviting speculative attacks from abroad, which effectively masquerades as solutions when they're in fact structural traps. Climate folks don't engage in those issues. You friends in the economic justice space have actually much longer history and experience and expertise on these issues. So what I want to challenge us to think about is, as we want to address food sovereignty, as we want to address renewable energy sovereignty, as we want to develop Pan-African industrial policies that capitalizes on Africa's resources and helps to develop Africa's capabilities and helps to advance Africa's prosperity, we need to join hands, we need to join forces so that we can actually reset the terms of Africa's engagement, but also develop a long-term strategic vision that allows the whole of Africa to be able to get behind it in a way that we can actually become the rule makers. And being the rule makers will also allow us to be able to shift the geopolitics so that the historic polluter is actually required to face up the climate harm they've caused and to be able to provide the reparations that are needed to allow us to develop our resilience, but also leapfrog that image and become a green leader, and in the process become a renewable energy superpower so that Africa can lead in the revolution that is going to help secure our safety and prosperity in the planet. This is not going to be done by environmentalists alone. It's not going to be done by development practitioners alone or economic experts alone. We need to actually cut these silos in which we work and join forces so that we can together be able to help our government take advantage of the chances and be able to deliver what we truly require in our continent.
We call for policies and practices that put people first. We call for policies and practices that put people first.